This is FoundFlix Presents. On this episode of FoundFlix Presents, we'll be looking at a movie that is very special to me, The Frighteners, celebrating its 20th anniversary today. 20 years. Jesus. The film follows a Ghostbuster played by Michael J. Fox. See? Says right there on the back, Ghostbuster. I guess you'd say he's actually more of a paranormal investigator, but that's not quite correct either. He's actually a con man using his ability to see dead people in order to make a quick buck. This concept is really cool because any similar idea like the Ghostbusters or Kolchak, it's about the protagonist trying to convince the non-believing public about the existence of paranormal. Frank isn't interested in anything like that. He's just a down on his luck guy using this weird gift of his to make a living. It's just so out there, and seeing Marty McFly himself playing against type like this is really a blast. So the tone of the movie rides the line between horror and comedy, kind of like most of PJ's others in the genre. He has a sort of childlike lunacy that bubbles to the surface, maybe similar to Sam Raimi, a sort of unbridled and unique visual style. But this movie does have a little trouble keeping that balance in check, and some of it is maybe just a bit too silly.
I like it when they lie still like that.
Yeah, that's happening. A ghost cowboy is fucking a mummified corpse. It's still funny, but undercuts the horror maybe too much. With this in mind, the Blu-ray has a longer cut, which is called the director's cut. It's about 14 minutes longer than the theatrical. Usually I would prefer the director's cut, but this edit throws that balance of goofy and horror over the edge in a series of scenes early in the film that introduce his ghost cohorts. It's just way too goofy and goes too far into slapstick kind of humor. Even PJ said they cut these scenes to kick the story into gear, and I agree. To me, the theatrical and leaner version is actually superior to the extended cut. Most of what's added is more of a novelty, nothing that really adds anything major to the film. Up to this point in his career, director Peter Jackson was known for insane horror splatter romps with his trademark humor, and Frighteners was his first film with a major studio and big star. So it's interesting to see PJ's progression as a director and how he works with his higher budget. The biggest addition to his arsenal this time is the major use of CG for the first time in any of his movies, something that he will become well known for after this movie. It's really funny because he mentions that he had to buy computers to complete the visual effects on this movie. He started with 1 and ended up with 35. As they were finishing, he was concerned what he was going to do with all these computers he bought, and conveniently around this time started getting the first phone calls about Lord of the Rings. Oh, there you go, that'll put those things to work. But I have a feeling he had to buy a shitload more computers for those movies. Gotta shrink Elijah Wood and stuff. By the way, if you like behind the scenes documentaries, the ones on the Blu-ray are amazing. It has a 4-hour documentary that goes into detail about pretty much every step of making the movie. It's really fascinating to learn so much about the movie and will definitely give you your Frighteners fill. The first shot of the movie is really cool and sets up the tone and the feeling of the movie all in one very impressive take. Also, Danny Elfman's rusty organ that springs to life is just perfect to give us instant creepy atmosphere. His score really enhances things a lot. We start outside of a creepy rundown mansion and then fly inside through the windows, blending shots into one via CG. And this kind of movement going through the floors seamlessly wouldn't be possible without the help of a computer. But then as we see a woman, Patricia, being chased, we see the weakness of the CG of the time with this figure Wallpaper Man who is in the walls, kind of taking the form of whatever he is in while attacking Patricia. It looks very rubbery and kind of dilutes the impact they're going for. I wasn't bothered by it when I first saw it, but it's hard to ignore now. There's a few things that stick out like this, but I have to still give PJ credit because he's attempting to use CG to make something that would be impossible to make practically. It's not about being lazy or just, yeah, fuck it, just throw some CG in. He's using it as a tool to create even further out there ideas from his imagination. At this time around 1995, it's still a combo of practical and the computer working hand in hand. Like the ghosts look great, and thanks to motion controlled cameras, they are able to be in moving camera shots rather than superimposed into a static frame. It's really impressive and a pretty big contrast to the over-dependence of CG that crippled the Hobbit films. But by then, there was no turning back. The computer took his soul. And so far in the sleepy town of Fairwater, it seems like Frank has been able to keep his money-making scheme going thanks to the assistance of his goofy ghost cohorts, Stuart and Cyrus, or maybe better as Nerd Ghost and Disco Ghost. They pick some suckers and the ghosts show up first, causing supernatural mischief like lifting the bed or making dishware float around. Thusly, the helpless victims have to make a phone call to the only guy in town that can help, Frank Bannister, and he comes roaring in, spraying holy water from a gun and spouting some mumbo jumbo about ectoplasm, and finally sticks them with an enormous bill for his services. But things are different on this particular case at the home of Ray and Dr. Lucy. Ray is a non-believer, ushering Frank out when a carved number appears on Ray's forehead. Frank is a little weirded out and thinks that his ghost friends are responsible, but it was actually something else. And it appears there's a more malevolent force at work here, seen in the form of a Grim Reaper, which still looks very foreboding and creepy, and is probably the best handled full CG element in the movie. There's sort of a mystery about the identity identity of the killer, and the carved numbers seen on Ray earlier are the same seen in a serial killing by Jake Busey years earlier at the local hospital. And it turns out the Lady Patricia seen attacked at the beginning used to be romantically involved with Jake and was there during the killings. Oh look, they have the complete Peter Jackson VHS collection. Nice! As the Reaper claims more victims, the police are stumped with no evidence to speak of, and thusly they call in the expert, Special Agent Dammers, played by the Reanimator's Jeffrey Combs. He is spectacular in this movie. Dammers works undercover in cult and satanic cases, and has obviously gotten in a little too deep, causing some serious mental unhinging. And Combs excels with his performance. This is probably my favorite performance of his of all time. Like when he gets yelled at by Dr. Lucy, Dammers flips out and rushes to the bathroom, vomiting painfully. Then when the well-meaning sheriff offers help, Dammers rejects him in a hilarious way.
Sheriff Perry, you are violating my territorial bubble.
Territorial bubble. Even his appearance, like his hair, super greased and parted and shaved all on the sides, it's like, what the hell is this guy's deal? He's nuts! It's awesome. Frank gets tied into the killings as a suspect after he is the last to see two people who wind up dead. First, there's a guy in the shitter at a miserable medieval times ripoff, and later when he attempts to save this local reporter lady Maggie St. Jones, who was next on the Reaper's list. He tries to help her escape, but the Reaper gets to her when he loses control of the car, having flashbacks of his wife and him crashing on the same road. As Maggie exits the car, the Reaper gets her. Poor Frank, he just wanted to help. Now Frank has become the prime suspect in the killings, and Dammers is convinced it's going to be tough to track him down. But Frank just shows up at the police station, alerting them to where Maggie's body is. He gets arrested, leading to one of the absolute highlights of the movie, this interrogation scene with Frank and Dammers. It's just the two of them, no visual effects. It's mainly Dammers probing Frank, believing that Frank has psychic powers of some sort that he has been using to kill. But Frank is kind of in silent despair and unresponsive to Dammers' annoyance. It works so well and is really able to build an intensity, especially thanks to the handheld close-ups. Oh, you think that's close? How about that? Ah, now that's close! This whole scene feels really bizarre and unsettling, and it's all done with just a few elements, no CG required. And when Frank starts shaking, upset, Dammers takes this to mean Frank is attempting to kill him with his mind powers. Luckily, Dammers is prepared. It's a perfect capper to an already great scene. I love that Dammers guy, what a weirdo! Now Frank is even more determined to stop the Reaper from killing, but that's as far as I'm gonna go into the plot. You'll just have to see it, but it's all still really exciting as the movie shifts gears in a lot of interesting ways, leading to an exciting conclusion in the abandoned hospital where the killings happen. So before this movie came out, I was already a huge fan of Peter Jackson, and the idea of him making a new movie starring Michael J. Fox was sort of like a dream come true. I actually saw this movie when it came out in theaters with my grandma. It was during the Olympics, and I remember the theater was less than half full. Bad timing with the release, but whatever. I remember I just loved it. He still had some of his trademark lunacy, but he was able to take it to the next level visually. In fact, I liked the movie so much that I actually wrote Peter Jackson a letter and sent him a poster to hopefully sign. In the letter, I gushed about the movie and said if he would sign my poster, I would see Lord of the Rings so many times I would have it memorized. Imagine my delight when a while later, this showed up in the mail, and with a response from PJ himself thanking me for the letter. It was basically the coolest thing ever, so you can imagine why I view this film with a large amount of adoration. It's interesting because unlike PJ's previous horror films, Frighteners isn't very graphic. Apparently it was put into production with the intent of being PG-13, and later they decided just let it be rated R. But they didn't really add anything to warrant the rating, so the movie does feel a bit tame when it comes to over-the-top gore. It's not really a bad thing, as the movie is really going for a balance of horror and comedy, doesn't really need the extra bloodshed. But what I would really like to still see happen, and PJ talks about this in the commentary a bit, the idea of being able to create gore and on-screen effects that aren't possible with practical effects. I think he says it when he's referencing this part where Nerd Ghost puts his head in a police car. Then as the engine starts, he gets chopped up and fed through the car, shooting out the tailpipe. It's insane! Again, he uses CG to create these completely ridiculous visuals that aren't otherwise possible. So I would love to see PJ revisit his horror roots, but fully utilizing CG to make a sort of new era of CG splatter movie. Not those cheap blood spurts that low-budget movies use a lot nowadays, but that kind of inspired creativity that CG requires to create. It doesn't seem like PJ will ever make a straight horror film like in the old days ever again, but I'll keep hoping. Okay, so that's it for this episode of FoundFlix Presents, but I hope that if you haven't seen this movie, check it out. If you have seen it, what did you guys think of the Frighteners? Which of PJ's horror films is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments. Also, if you have any suggestions for other forgotten gems I should feature in future episodes, I'd love to hear them. Thanks for watching and stay tuned to FoundFlix for all the best in horror entertainment.